Morning, everybody. First of all, I'm delighted to be here and have the chance to really carry on the discussion that John started a minute ago, which is about how to make partnerships work. I'll come at it from, I guess, the experience inside a client, in this case, P&G. I think you probably know P&G is a consumer goods company. Do you have the clicker there?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, is it up here? Lovely, thank you. Yeah, sure. Is a consumer goods company. You probably know turnover is about $85 billion a year, so pretty large. Quite a broad brand portfolio, so laundry and cleaning stuff you'll be familiar with, like Ariel and so forth. A lot of beauty care, Olay, Pantene, this sort of thing. Gillette, big male beauty business for us. And then some other stuff you may not be aware of. So we do a lot of fine fragrances. So we're actually one of the biggest fine fragrance houses in the world. So Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, Lacoste, stuff like this. So a little bit picking up on John's point around diversity of roles. And even if you say a role of a salesperson in, let's say, our mainstream retail business, calling on the likes of Tesco, is very different from our salon professional hair care business of Weller, calling on little hair salons. So in terms of the challenge for delivering services, it's actually quite broad inside P&G. And as you know, it's a pretty global company. So we actually got into expanding around the world, I guess, probably quite early on. So we were in China in '87, I think one of the first 3 companies to really move in there. So we've been there the best part of 25 years now, which is a fair old time. And we've got operations on the ground in about 75 countries. So that's the sort of landscape of what we're dealing with. For myself, my background, I guess, originally is as an engineer. I used to work for Shell on an oil refinery, which seems a long way away from HR outsourcing. But actually, it's a pretty similar kind of game in a way. You're trying to achieve some kind of outcome, or multiple outcomes with some kind of inputs. And anyway, I switched out of engineering, I guess, probably 20 years ago, into the IT area, focusing really on how to transform businesses. And I've worked with the R&D function quite a bit, the commercial function quite a while. I worked at a .com in Chicago and I was starting up a business-to-business enterprise. And I guess the last 4 years I've been in the HR space. So my responsibility is HR operations for Europe, and then I also have benefits delivery globally. So if that's a little bit of the setup, what I wanted to do, if I can push the right button. Am I being dumb here? Yes, I am. What I wanted to do is really go through three phases. So a little bit of partnership, where what have our beginnings been? A little bit of kind of what have we learned from that, and then where next. And I'd like this to be as conversational as possible. I've got, I don't know, probably a dozen slides or more. Not that I want to run through them all, but more just so I've got something to engage on topics that are of interest to you. So please jump in as I go along. If you want to get into particular areas, don't just sit and listen, please. So let me open up with a hypothesis, which is, I believe we need to do 2 things. So we really need a game-changing evolution of our shared services in the first place. And for that, maybe the 2 are chicken and egg, we actually really need a game-changing form of partnership and relationship with third-party vendors and clients together. So that's kind of the hypothesis that I want us to kick around, because the belief that I have, and certainly shared by colleagues at P&G and so forth, is there is a whole new tranche of value that can be created that we need to tap into, which if we don't, we will just become yesterday's news. And if you're yesterday's news, you're on the path to a pretty bad place, typically. Let me start by giving a sort of overview of where do we think we are from a P&G angle. What have we sort of learned? And I guess message number 1 is that partnering has worked for us. So we think we're faster and stronger by the fact we have a partnership model than we would be if we were still doing things alone. And just to give you a sense, our real delve into partnership came, I guess, 2000 to 2003 was the big moment. So the big moment for us, 2003, we formed 3 partnerships, so $4.2 billion worth of contracts with these 3 partners. So it was a pretty big and bold move into business process outsourcing, IT outsourcing, and so forth. And what we've learned, as I say, 10 years on, is we think we're faster and stronger. And you know, it'll sound a little bit cheesy, but what we found, and it's easy to say you need to be in win-win. It's intellectually simple, but I mean, as John expounded extremely well, it's bloody difficult. It really is difficult. So what I wanted to do as we get into this is talk a bit about what do we think we've learned from either A, selecting partners, B, making partnerships work, and C, where could we take partnerships forward. And I think that probably is the heart of the debate that's worth having, because certainly what I would say is what we've learned at P&G, and our partnership models are working well for us, but the important thing is it's working well for us, so I wouldn't presume that what works for us would work for you, because you have to build around what works and what the need is of your business. So in P&G, we have global brands, so the very heart and nature of our business is very global. We have a drive to create global consistency and so forth. So that's a general feeling and direction within the core company. If you've got a company that's saying that we want very independent operating units, it's really more a holding company of many different independent entities, then if you like, you don't really have a following wind behind you or even a desire to create more global speed and consistency, which for us is a really important thing. So for P&G to win as a company, global scale is one of our biggest opportunities. So if we look at our competition, we're probably twice as big as our nearest competitor. So our nearest competitor would be Unilever. But that's Unilever in the household business. If you go into beauty, you're talking L'Oreal, and so on and so forth. So the challenge for us is that we have many, many smaller competitors, if you can call a sort of $30, $40 billion company small, which of course it isn't. But they have the potential to move much quicker than us. We have the potential to have more scale, and we should be able to bring stuff to market and get it around the world faster than our competition. So that's the kind of game we're in, and therefore the sort of ideas that I'll be talking are really coming from that context and that business opportunity. As I say, I wouldn't presume to believe that the same needs were there in your company. So with all that said, just flick on from there. In broad strokes, here's the sort of journey we've been on. So recall, we've done these 3 big deals. One of them was HR outsourcing, which was IBM, so a big monolithic HR outsourcing deal, 10-year agreement starting 1st of January 2004. And we've actually renewed it a second time 2 years ago, so that'll extend our relationship to 15 years. But the nature of what we do together today is very different from what we were doing on day one, because as John rightly said, the minute you sign the contract, it's already out of date because the thing is moving on. So one of the first things we've learned is trying to lock everything down is the biggest mistake you could ever make, because by default, you've locked yourself into the 1st of January 2004. This is a nightmare. So control versus flexibility is one of the big balance points that we've, I think, learned in painful ways of how to get better at. I wouldn't say we're perfect at it, far from it, but it's a key element. The journey we've had then with IBM and sort of the scale of business relevance is sort of how much new value are you creating for your core business? So, what you're doing one year is great, but that's then part of the base. What's next? Unless you're going up that relevance axis, you become irrelevant pretty quickly. And so our journey has gone in 3 stages, and where we're at now is the sort of new value one, and I'll touch on that a little bit more later on. But I would say our learnings from the first 2 phases, the first one was stabilize. So the situation we were in P&G when we outsourced is, because as a company we'd expanded worldwide through the late 80s and 90s, we had seen 2 things. So one, a lot of duplication of infrastructure, processes and so on around the countries, which was obviously a massive waste of money and was very slow to evolve, which for us is the death knell. If we're slower than competition, we will get killed. The second thing was, as we went into new markets, we really wanted to have a kind of P&G in a box. So we open up in country A, we want to take the processes in and all the infrastructure underneath it. So those were our 2 drivers. So by the time we got to 2003, we'd actually consolidated our HR back office, our financial back office, and some other areas into 3 service centres globally. So we had reached quite a mature point internally as a company. And so for us, the big opportunity was, how can we create scale beyond P&G? That's what we're looking to do. How can we bring in capabilities and skills and innovation in the wider marketplace that we couldn't take advantage of internally, because we were very, by nature, when we were totally insourced, we are very internally focused. And you know how it is in a big company. You've got a lot of smart people. They think things through very well. And to be frank, if you're not sufficiently engaged on a day-to-day basis externally, it's really difficult to actually bring in any external thinking and innovation. It's certainly been our experience. So as we outsourced, it really was a lift and shift. So we've got 3 service centres with, I guess, about a couple of thousand people sat in them, and we basically sold them. So all the employees then suddenly had an IBM badge instead of a P&G badge. And things continued on. So the 3 things that went on in the stabilisation phase is we had to learn how to operate with an interface between companies. So operationally we had to learn how to do that, because suddenly it wasn't your colleagues sat across your desk, it's someone from a different company. And we found in an unconscious way that a big gap was opening up, because the objectives of IBM as our provider was obviously, to John's point, it's their business. I mean, they want to make money out of it, and the way to make money out of it is to strip cost out of the operation. It's to try and find ways to scale things across multiple partners, and it's to get out of doing things that really don't have any strategic value. So the more you're doing one-offs for individual clients, there's no value to be had there. You know, it's just stuff you've ended up stuck with. And what I must say is, when we did our outsourcing, whilst I've made it sound very clean, 3 service centres, off you go, when you sort of peel the onion a bit and get down to the reallys of the processes and the work, you'd find in country A this was in scope, in country B it wasn't in scope, or in fact in site A it was in scope, and in site B it wasn't in scope. So very ragged seams. And what we found is that gaps started opening up, so service levels started to drop, and things started to get ugly. So a little bit to your point, John, the old watermelon was very true. And the watermelon had big red blotches on the outside, which were kind of mouldy, you know, because it was just abundant to all. A lot of this stuff wasn't working. So our stabilisation phase was a little bit of moving from the recognising, gosh, we are actually 2 companies here. This isn't the P&G team who just now have a nice new name and so on. Suddenly we needed to work operationally together in a different way, and we needed to learn how to work commercially. Because to be frank, at the outset, we weren't really concerned with how much margin or profit our partner was making, because really that was their business. That's for them to look after. We'll look after our business. And kind of what we've learned is actually that's the recipe to disaster. And unless you still maintain emotional ownership for the end-to-end operation, including what your partner is doing, and equally as well, your partner needs to feel that end-to-end ownership, so that you really jointly work on creating the best outcomes operationally and also commercially, and also from a capability standpoint, then we found we were going to be on a road to disaster. So that was our stabilisation phase. I guess it probably lasts 2 or 3 years, and I'll show you some results in a minute, and you'll see kind of results that just went nowhere for a few years. We then got to a point which I would call the optimise phase, and that's had really a couple of key facets. So the first part of it was this realisation that some of the businesses that our partner was providing, they just weren't very good at it and would never be good at it, and indeed it wasn't relevant or important to them. So given that we'd done a big mega deal, what we managed to do was have a good conversation around, well, which businesses do you want to be in and which businesses do you not want to be in? And thank God we managed to have that kind of open conversation. Otherwise, we were on a passport to a real bloody period and a horrible period and a horrible end. And so actually what we ended up doing was taking a number of services back from IBM, and some of them we outsourced to other providers who were more specialist, best-of-breed players. And some of them, so for example, executive compensation, it's truly unique to P&G. We have our own way of doing it. There's no value in outsourcing that whatsoever. There's no new value that can be added. There's no scale to be done. we have enough people doing operational work that we can deliver operational excellence. So, we rebalance things. And whilst the process of going through that was really painful and horrible emotionally, actually, if I look at the quality of work that was done, and it predates me, so I take no credit for it, the quality of work that was done was actually really exceptional, because what people did manage to do was to get to the objectivity and the key facts of the matter, to be mutually honest. So from our partner standpoint, it's like, do you know what? We're not going to be a big provider in that service area. We have to deliver to you because it's part of the contract. If you take it away from us, we're happy because it's a sink on our profit. And we don't want to invest into that area. We recognise what we're offering isn't great, but we don't want to put a penny into it. It has no strategic value. So that was the first part of our optimization phase. And then the second part of the optimization phase has been the thing that says, how do we strip out cost? So one of the big things for us was when we'd set up with IBM, we'd had a service centre in Newcastle, Manila, and Costa Rica. So because IBM then took over our service centres, they then had a service centre in Manila, Costa Rica, and Newcastle. And what they found as their HRO business developed in Europe was it made more sense for them to put that out of Budapest. So really, we were then sat with this Newcastle operation, delivering really uniquely for P&G. So we weren't getting any advantage of scale or tapping into the capabilities that IBM were having, the innovation, the talent pipeline, and so on and so forth. And so what we did was together said, hey, why don't we do something pretty bold, which is move all of our payrolls, all of our benefits delivery. We also do employee taxation and HR services that may be different in different companies, so employee taxation, all the accounting around that, and moved it to their strategic centres. So this has been a pretty big upheaval, so serving about 50,000 employees. If I take a service, payroll in a country as one unit, we've done 94 moves over the last year and a half, and it has actually gone brilliantly. And I think the reason it's gone brilliantly is for IBM, this is really, really value-adding for them to bring more scale into their service centres, because it gives them critical mass and all the upsides you get in service centres and why service centres exist. So brilliant for them. Brilliant for us because we can now tap into all the things that I mentioned, and brilliant as well because the cost to serve goes down. So exactly to John's point, we didn't have a single discussion over margin. Everything was about, actually, there's a fantastic, north of $10 million opportunity here if we can shift all this stuff over there. And then once you start getting the sort of, wow, we're excited, we can actually make some money here together, you then start getting the creativity about where else can we strip out costs. So we're transforming our whole travel expenses operation now in a way that will be less work for employees and lower costs to serve, which again is just a beautiful thing. So employees will like it, IBM will like it, and we'll like it both financially, because it's just taking the true end-to-end costs down. And that to me is the heart and the name of the game, is you've got to look at the total picture. So we learned in the painful way that when we only looked after the bit that we were accountable for, that's the passport to disaster. And then once we kind of figured out, painful as it is, that we need to sort of look after our provider, which is a very sort of transactional way to look at it. If you think of them genuinely as your partner, it's natural to say, hey, what are we trying to do here together? Because we know we can do something more together than we could if we were apart. So that's our optimization phase, and that's kind of coming to a close now, and we're at the next point of inflection that says, where's the next value? So I'll come on to that later. Here's a few results then. So I've broken out 3 metrics, so service levels, employee satisfaction, and audit scores, because controls is pretty important. If I look at the timeline then, 2004 to 13 on the SLAs, you can see the red line shows things went backwards and then improved. Now, that makes a slightly confusing reading, because one of the things we do, to John's point on continuous improvement, is what we do in our contracts is build in that the service levels will go up over time, or at least we have the right for them to go up, because it should be a natural thing. It says we have to be improving all the time, And that's either going to result in better quality service levels, or maybe we find a cheaper way to deliver everything, so same service quality, lower cost, and then we can have a different discussion around that. So if I take the 2013 service level expectations and map them back onto the performance of 2004, that's the blue line. So actually, after our sort of stabilisation period, 2004, 5, 6, 7, we've really been rocketing up pretty nicely, and we're very comfortable with where we are. I'm conscious I've not put a direct scale on that, but there's not that much higher to go, I would say. If I look at employee satisfaction, happily enough, I mean, so 10, I don't know if you can read it, is excellent, 6 is good, and across a whole bunch of services, we're typically between good to very good, versus, up towards the lower part of excellent. And that's, it's your classic thing. We do a couple of things. Some of the services we just do surveys after you use the service. And for some of them we use our market research organisation that comes in and runs focus groups and all the rest of it. So we keep it independent from our services operation, and they go out and they learn what they learn. And it's incredibly valuable, because you know how it is, if you feel accountable for something, you cannot help but either put leading questions in or only hear what you want to hear. So actually, what we've found really helpful is having our external market research or organisation doing that for us, so that we get a clear view of reality. Because that's, we think reality sometimes is painful, but if you can't see it, then you're stuck. And then lastly, on the audit side, we have an internal audit scale of 8 is as high as you can get. 4 means you're probably going to lose your job if you do it again. And you can see over the last, this starts from 2009 to 13, the actual stewardship and compliance is strong. So, we're in a pretty happy place, I have to say. Moving on then, so where are we today? I talked about this sort of move from the one monolithic relationship to a whole network. We're now, as you can see, we have a whole network of providers out there. And I think, for those of you that have been here on Tuesday, put the bits that I was here for, I think everyone was talking about the days of monolithic deals is sort of over. Certainly from everything I've seen and experienced, I think that's certainly the case. You just got to look at the world in general. It's about putting the Lego bricks together. And finding what are the right bricks for what you need is really the name of the game. And that's certainly where we are today. Okay, moving on then. So what did we learn? Let me start with what have we learned about outsource models, and then I'll move on to choosing partners. And I expect when we get to choosing partners and making partnerships work, you'll see different diagrams to describe the same discussion as John, so I won't linger for so long on that. So what we've learned first and foremost, I think, on outsource models is doing things that are big and bold, that scare you, is a much better strategy than incrementalism. And the reason that we found that is, what it tends to do is, with the organisation, it really focuses their mind. Right, we've got to make that happen. How do we make that happen? Got to do it. How are we going to do it? And it really becomes very energising. So you can have one frame of mind that says, HR processes, pretty stable, it runs along, chug, 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 chug. It then tends to attract people that want to chug, chug, chug. It doesn't get the excitement flowing. It doesn't say, come on, what amazing thing can we do here? So big and bold for us. Right, let's move our whole operation out of Newcastle and put half of it into Manila, half of it into Budapest. Let's do it inside a year, and let's have no degradation of service. I remember that was terrifying me when we agreed we were going to do it. But I love the fact that it terrified me, because I knew that I was making the right choice. If it felt like, oh yeah, we'll go gently and easily, and over time we'll see how it plays out with one country and see if it works. It's too slow, and it's uninspiring, and it just doesn't get the best out of people. So big and bold, we found, is really important. I think I've talked about that end-to-end outcome focus already, so I won't say any more about it. Balance is one of the interesting things that we've learned. So with balance, this is the balance between the day-to-day operational stuff and the strategic stuff. So there tends to be, on the right-hand side there, loads of stuff that's going on, going wrong, there's a problem here, someone's complaining there, blah, blah, and it's very easy to spend all of your time working on fixing today and taking your mind off of where you're trying to go. So, you know, too close to reality or being close to reality and then getting consumed by it, what we found leads us down that hole of like the blame game and just beating each other up. Because the reality is you're never going to get perfect. It's just, at least as we found, is impossible. And the more you focus in on the everyday stuff, you can get into this ever-decreasing circles bit. On the other hand, if all you do is play super strategic all the time, you know, Rome is burning and you've got these great plans about how wonderful things are going to be. We found, at least in the HR outsourcing, we've never ended up living in that land because there's so much emotive stuff in HR that, you know, things can't help to get your attention. So for us, it's been about learning to try and get balance and putting more energy into the strategic picture. So key things for us around that have been really taking the time to work a proper strategic business plan of where you're trying to go. So it's including the financials, it's including really the big opportunities. What are the big opportunities to create value? It's taking the time out to spend a day or two at a time, once a quarter, together face to face. So I'm sat in London. If I think about IBM as my partner, my counterpart is sat in Budapest. It's very easy, if we're not careful, just to do stuff by phone, talk about the business of the day, or this needs to be happening there, what about that, da, 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 da. What we found is by carving out the time to really, really step back is incredibly important. And it's so easy to let it slip, so easy. Because other priorities come up, and it's like, well, you can't, you know, we'll put it back a week, and then it goes back 2 weeks, and it's back a month. It's so easy. So that one you can probably feel by the way I'm talking is at least in P&G, one of the most challenging. And then the last one is on partner capability. I'm not sure if the graphic is very instructive or not. But the key thoughts here are is it's at least as important where your partner is trying to get to as what it is they can offer today, is what we've found. So if you haven't got a partner that's going, I'm going there, I don't know whether going there is where you're trying to go, P&G, but that's where we're trying to go. If they're not trying to go anywhere, then by default, you're stuck. So they might be brilliant today, but if they're not going anywhere, 3-5 years' time, you're stuck. So for us, we know, and I mean, John, you talked a little bit about it earlier on with, you know, when you moved away from IBM, the transition to a new partner is painful. I mean, if you have to do it, you have to do it, and we all recognise it's painful. For us, to create the real value, you've got to build the trust, you've got to build all those connections and relationships from the very top right the way down to the day-to-day. So picking a partner that is trying to go somewhere, even if the somewhere is slightly different from where you think you want to go, if they're going somewhere and you can see they're moving with pace, that's probably a good partner to pick. Because if they're going somewhere with pace, they've probably got some good ideas around why that is, so maybe they can bring something to you that you never thought about, which is why you would choose to go to partners in the first place. And equally as well, people that tend to have that sort of vision and drive tend to be very open and interested to understand what clients want and genuinely understand, listen, think, really, I want to get close, can I come in and talk to your people, can I spend days, and I'm not going to charge for it. I mean, when people say, I can come in and do an analysis, but it's like, oh, you know, forget it. So that will be the fourth one. Let me pause there. Any experiences, questions, other insights other people have got? Because I'm very conscious I'm talking really from my own frame of reference.
The role of the labor unions.
The role of the labor... Do you hear me? Hello? Hello, hello? Well, maybe in Procter you may not have such a strong Works Council impact.
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Because I like the big and bold. The thing is, how did you get around there? Is this a few tricks and hints?
Yeah, it's a good question. Certainly, let me think of some examples. So if I take the whole lift and shift of all the operations from country A to country B, there's nothing to talk about. We'll continue to pay you, we'll continue to deliver benefits, it's all behind the curtain. So we mention it in passing, just so you know this is what we're doing, FYI. If it's things that actually touch and impact employees, this might sound a bit trite, but it's sort of a lot of where we try to create value today is in reducing the effort and work for employees to do what they need to do for HR transactions to happen in the broadest sense of the word. So often we're coming to employees with, in essence, a very positive proposition, you know, and everyone hates doing travel expenses. It takes a lot of time and energy. You know, what if we could reduce that by 50%? Because you could scan receipts, you could do X, Y, and Z. It would, you know, does that sound good? We're investing as a company, so a lot of the rhetoric with our works councils and unions in P&G is around, you know, times are tough, no one seems to be investing. So the minute we've got any sign of an investment, it's actually received pretty positively. There are occasionally, of course, things. So one of the things that one of our partners is really good at is helping us realise that some of our policies are sort of insane, that they are so complex relative to competition. So they bring in really helpful benchmarking, which just says, you know, we can deliver you a service, and we do today, that does all of this. Recognise all of our other clients do this. Up to you what you choose to do, but might be an interesting insight, because if you changed, you could make it simpler, then it would reduce costs by this amount, and like any operation, the simpler it is, the more the quality tends to go up. So then you can sometimes end up with being, well, maybe we're being a bit generous on international relocation packages, or maybe we're being a bit generous with particular employee benefits in factories. So we had one factory, it's a slight digression, but it's just too funny. So we had one factory where one of the locally negotiated benefits was an underwear allowance. So did anyone else have an underwear allowance in a factory? But only for women. Only for women, not the men. So as a trivial example of a benefit that we stopped delivering, it's almost like a little, like a reality TV thing. So the criteria around who got what underwear and could replace it and what frequency, depending on the level, years of service, and you can see it's one of these products of union negotiation. You know, but when you see it in the cold light today, it's insane. So that's one thing we got rid of. It's a very trivial example, but it's an example of where I won't say it's very value-adding for them. It's like, well, you're taking stuff away. The way we pitched it was along the lines of, you know, we all know times are tough. We can look at the economic situation. As a plant, the name of the game is get your total delivered cost of manufacturing to be as competitive as possible. The more we can take cost out of back office operations that aren't really adding any value, the better. So what we did is we rolled the benefit into another allowance, so there wasn't any material loss from the employee, but it simplified the so often when we're driving policy change, you know, there's certainly a negotiation of, does this have any material financial impact on me as an employee? But normally people can buy in, particularly in the plants, to operational simplification.
So there was no layoff or outsourcing?
No. So our big outsource was 2003. A lot of people gone. Any other?
I just wanted to ask about the partner relationships and whether you had some discipline around what you expected them to do in working with other partners. Because when you go best of breed, inevitably they've got to work together. I just wondered what your kind of thoughts were and how much you feel you own that versus the partner.
So another one, double-clicking the partner, is this desire to truly partner. You probably can't see the graphic, but it's two people shaking hands and two other people adding bits in the puzzle. The idea being exactly to your point. So at a conceptual level, it's that sort of willingness of people to truly deliver the end outcome that you want. And then it becomes obviously natural for them to say, well, yeah, we need to work across partners. So for us, probably international relocation is probably our biggest one, where we've got multiple partners here, there, and everywhere. And in partners, I would also include the P&G line business units, who tend to sort of initiate transactions. We look at them in the same way as we do non-Procter & Gamble partners. So for us, it's a total ecosystem that, as the people with the accountability for that, you know, I say, well, these are all the partners, here's how you fit in the model. So there's this interesting dynamic internally that we have. They're both clients and they're actually operators for us, which is always an interesting one. But directly to your question then, it is a difficult area, right? It's clearly a difficult area because it starts to stretch partnerships to a place that go, well, you know, this isn't really my core responsibility to make sure that, you know, my relationship back and forth transactionally with this other partner is working effectively. But yeah, okay, I can see I need to do it. So the way we work it is set the expectations clear at the outset around the end-to-end model. Get all the partners together and say, right, let's agree very clearly where the handoffs are, so that there's operational clarity. And then we just make sure that when we review our services, which we do on a quarterly basis around what's working, what's not working, those are the kind of hot spots you know that you need to go and look at. Is that working well? Is it not working well? And you can normally judge that by the outcomes of, are we having successful, I don't know, if it's something like a payroll transfer date from country A to country B. Is that outcome working well? If it isn't, what's the root cause? So what we found, the more we can get our partners to truly feel accountable for the total end result, without saying, if the end result is bad, it means you screwed up. It's like, well, the end result's bad, which one of us has done what? So with the way it works is, if it's the P&G business unit, my partners hold me accountable. So, hey Richard, look, I'm really sorry that you guys are screwing up. You know, you need to improve this, that and the other. From what we've seen, we think this might be the root cause, which of course then feels like help.
Hi, I'm Fabienne from Microsoft. So I hear you talk about outsourcing a lot, and I just wanted to understand what is then left internally at PG, if you can share a bit, what is still in-house?
Good question. So we've got a rather large business services operation as a whole, so pretty much everything that isn't R&D, manufacturing, distribution, sales and marketing would be in what we would call global business services. And then if I look within global business services, depending on which vertical we're talking, we have degrees of outsourcing. So the ones that are extremely outsourced would be IT and HR. If I look at our finance area, we have very limited outsourcing. And that's for us about maintaining control because of the Sarbanes-Oxley and all that kind of good stuff. So if I look at what, in the areas that are highly outsourced, HR and IT, the bits that are retained is really the leadership for that particular area. So what we found is, unless we're in a position to lead and govern the whole operation, where we're trying to go with it, to see the business opportunities, to make sure that the actual delivery is happening with excellence. And what we've learned is we need to be far more integrally involved with our partners than we ever first thought. So we've added a lot of people internally to govern. So we've got 10 times as many people as we had in 2004 governing. Now, we had a very small number governing back in 2004, but it resonated with me. What you said, John, is, you can't just say, well, I've got a contract, there's the scorecards, you're running everything now. Oh, that's green, what are you going to do about it? That was sort of how we started. So everything around leadership and direction. I would say really innovation, R&D, if you like. So I think it's quite difficult for partners to innovate. I mean, innovation tends to happen at the coalface of where the business opportunity lies. Sometimes it comes purely from the technology side, but rarely is our experience. So we feel that we have to take the lead on spotting big ideas, getting our partners involved quickly, but the initial spotting, so we're doing that. And as I say, the real operational governance day to day. Does that answer your question? Great. Let me move on a little bit more then around partner selection. And I think I probably touched on some of these, and I think you'll see a strong commonality with what John shared. So this sort of passion to be world-class, I think I mentioned about where are they trying to go. So as P&G, we always aspire to be the best consumer goods company in the world, which in real speak translates into having the best products and brands in all the categories that we play in. That's how we measure whether we think we are good or not at that, and how we do from a, obviously, financial return to the markets. The second one, this capability to scale and innovate, is a really big one. So clearly the opportunity, or why we have chosen to outsource, is for this very reason. Because it's sort of creating value beyond what P&G could create on its own. And it's actually, I think, for vendors, very difficult to do. How do I create solutions or services that will span across multiple clients, given that each client tends to have its own uniquenesses? So I think we're seeing things like software as a service coming in that just says, well, look, there it is, the price point's great, the user interface is wonderful, it takes all the effort and work out, and maybe that will be a sufficient driver for companies to say, yeah, I'll give up with all my uniqueness. So it's sort of a build it and they will come. Or for the sort of more the BPO providers, which we're working with in a lot of areas, it's more, look, you know how we're working, you know how that company's working, that company's working. You need to take your going business and find a way to create scale across the board, because that will reduce cost, it will accelerate innovation and so forth. So that one we see as being a very important area to penetrate. It's very easy, you know, if you're talking with a vendor and they can talk about innovation and so on, but we spend a lot of time and energy really penetrating that to really understand, do you really have the capability to do that, or is it that you just intellectually understand what that means? Operational excellence, I think, you know, kind of speaks for itself. And then I think we've talked desire to truly partner. So those are for us the 4 things that we look out for. I'll just move, I'm conscious of time, we've probably got about 5 minutes. Would it be helpful if I talked a little bit about what we found on making partnerships work? And it's sort of, I think, vaguely similar to what John's taught. So maybe what I'll do is just share some specific things that we do to make things work for us. And the heart of it is this thing around joint value creation. So unless each of you sees an opportunity to go after, it's very hard to make a partnership work. Otherwise, it's just a static mutual commitment that's been made. We've got a contract signed, we need to do some stuff for you, you're going to be the one that does it for us. By its nature, it's sort of stuck and doesn't go anywhere. And if things aren't going anywhere, everyone gets bored, and when people get bored, results tend to go down, thinking, everything just goes there. So there's got to be joint value. For us, it's about bringing in new scale opportunities to take cost out of the business. It's about bringing in innovation from the outside. That's what we're always looking for. And I think from the vendor side of it, it's about finding ways of working with us as a client to be able to either innovate new services that they can sell on to others. So it's a great way to fund R&D work. It's a great way to move into countries that they possibly couldn't move into. And it's an opportunity to create the scale across multiple clients to reduce the total cost of their operations. So those are the areas we tend to look for joint value together. And then within that, what we found is you can conceptually kick it around, but you need to come up with some pretty concrete plans and ideas, encapsulate them into a proper joint business plan, and then really go after it and manage it as tightly and firmly as you would with any operational sort of scorecards or metrics. And so that, as a vehicle, has been helpful for us. I was talking about balance a little bit earlier on between getting sucked into the day-to-day versus focusing on where you're trying to get to in the strategic. We found having a strong joint business plan and the same, rigors around where do we want to get to by when, are we making the progress or not, and holding ourselves as accountable for that as the day-to-day has been very helpful for us, just as a practical thing. On the commercial side, one of the things we've done is to this point on win-win is when you look at that whole activity system, typically where savings opportunities exist fall into two buckets. One might be in the core operation delivered by your vendor. So what we found is that by building in some sort of gain share agreement of wherever the value falls, we find a way to share it, has unlocked a lot of things, because suddenly then innovation of that nature is not a threat to business. And equally as well, if the value lands inside P&G of releasing employees' capacity or time, then there's some gain share back that way as well. So then everyone is motivated to find ways to take cost out. Or indeed, if it's a new revenue generating idea for a vendor, maybe a new solution, some software that could be scaled across many other companies, some gain share on, well, what if you start selling this to other companies? So that is really, really important, we found, in two ways. One is by getting that nailed down, but equally as important is the conversation that it drives to get a real strategic alignment on where you're trying to go. The other bit I'd say on commercial that we found very helpful is what I would call sort of oiling the machine. So the commercial process we found can great and move really slowly if you're not careful, running into the kind of challenges, you talk to one, John, is like, well, this is business critical, it needs to happen, yeah, but it's got to go through the commercial process and that takes 4 weeks. And it's like, well, no, this has to happen, we have to start work right now. What we found is that the more we can identify the kinds of typical projects, if you want to call them that, or changes that go on, and actually have the discussion up front as part of our overall contract to say, if it's this kind of work, do we agree that that would be non-billable? And if it's that kind of work, it would be billable? And do we agree we'll have a process for things that we declare, critical and urgent, that we've got an agreement that says we'll get on with it now, and then we'll always resolve down the path? Do we agree that getting some of that locked in has helped us enormously in getting the commercial process out of the way of delivering the operational result. On the relationship side, let me say a couple of things there. One of the things that we've started doing with our vendors, I guess over the last 3 years or so, is we actually do formal onboarding with them. So we onboard them to the P&G culture, how we tend to think and work, our business, what are our brands, what are our processes inside P&G, how does their role sit in the overall context of the activity system. So it really creates some relevance to their role, because if you're looking at a lot of these sort of BPO roles done in service centres, if the poor person doing it, they've got no idea of whether what they're doing is really, really critical, not critical. And they might know it's critical, but they might not know why it's critical. The minute you have meaning in your work, it takes on a whole new attitude inside the person. And suddenly it's like, I'm there, if I do this right, that will enable this family that's moving from A to B to get there in a way that works for them in a way. And if I don't, then I can see it's going to cause them pain. But people like that. They want to feel purpose. So we found that investing heavily in the new people that join our accounts has worked really, really well. The other thing that we've started doing is actually running, and I should say our partners also train us on their culture and how they work, which has been fascinating. The other bit that we've been doing is actually running training courses. So, like say leadership. So P&G, we've got our own way of training leadership. So we've been going into our partners and giving them leadership training. It's not to say, you people need more leadership, we're going to come and sort you out. It's in the spirit of, you're going to be delivering leadership training to your people anyway. Wouldn't it be interesting to get a different take on it? And so equally as well, they've come inside our company and given us a whole load of training around how to commercialise services and software and this sort of thing inside a business. And it's been fascinating. In part because you get a different take on things, but more so because it integrates everyone. So suddenly you've got a very collaborative, meaningful, growing experience for people with colleagues from there. So we always have people that are trainers that are actually working on the accounts. So it's as much a relationship building thing and mutual insights of, oh gosh, you see things differently. When we use that word in P&G, that has a really, really specific meaning. And it does, there's a word in, it's the same word in IBM, is it? Yeah, it is. But for us, it means something totally different. All that sort of stuff around, you think you understand what each other are talking about, and you find you don't. That's the kind of value we're getting as well. So on the relationship, it's that sort of thing. And then I couldn't agree more with everything John said around, from whether it be the top to top within the account or the executives above the account, right the way down to the operation level. Because people, in essence, are working in one team across company boundaries. If you don't have the good processes, good trust, and all that sort of thing, and invest in that, you end up in a bad place. And having been in a bad place, we've sort of seen both the downside of it and the upside. So that's probably all I wanted to say there. And I think time-wise, Faye, we've got 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions or comments as well, please?
Is that on? Yeah. Mine's more a comment, actually. It's interesting. I mean, I work in resourcing, but I've worked in-house, and I'm currently working on the outsourcing side. It's really interesting to see that you are such a sort of advanced buyer in terms of your approach, what you've done, what you've put in place, how that works, and really encouraging, actually, because there are so many contracts out there that don't work like this, and I've managed them from both sides of the fence. And obviously, you've put in place that you've put a lot of effort into this, put a really sophisticated model in place, and it just looks completely different to many other situations that I've seen from both sides of the fence, actually.
Interesting. I mean, and I do think it's just a question of learning through experience. I mean, if in P&G we went into outsourced models 10 years ago or more, so we've sort of been through it and learnt it. Not to say there isn't plenty more to learn. There's loads of stuff we can do a lot better. And I think one of the challenges with this, or what we've found, is it's really easy to intellectually understand what it takes, but it's just a whole world different to make it work. So, I mean, like win-win is a classic, isn't it? I mean, we all understand what it means, but when you seem to be losing, the person seems to be winning, it's hard to see situations very often as how can we create the constructs of win-win.
So you talk about partnership between P&G and then the supplier. I just wanted to know when you're dealing with this and setting up that partnership, and also once you're in the relationship, is it you, yourself, and you? Or are you supported by procurement? And I'm asking because I'm one of the few procurement people here on the summit. So is it just HR with the supplier, or are you backed up of a full team?
I should have said a little bit more about that. So the way we're organised in business services is we're not by function, we're organised by the service. So if I look in my organisation, about a third of the people are HR people, a third are finance people, and a third are IT people. So it's not a functional thing. It's more, who are the kinds of people needed to deliver the outcomes. Now, when it comes to procurement professionals, then for sure, we've got a procurement function inside the company. So as and when we get into some sort of sourcing type of study and so on, then I'll engage a procurement professional within the organisation. What I should say is we also have obviously a commercial governance team. So if I look at my team, both of them in Europe are functionally, so we have 2 people, and they're both functionally coded IT. But what you'll find within P&G IT function, because we've been heavily outsourced as an IT function, and our IT people are really the IT leaders and people that are very experienced at governing outsourced delivery models. then by their very nature, they've had now quite a lot of experience of managing commercial sides of things. So from an operational procurement, if you like, side of things, then we have people often from IT, sometimes from F&A. When it comes to a proper big deal, then we'll get in a kind of high power procurement specialist. But interestingly, the decision making we keep wholly within global business services, so within my organisation. It doesn't end up going to the function head or something like that. And we've been through the journey of function heads kicking and screaming and all the rest of it, of saying, no, it should be our decision, our decision, our decision, where we said, well, look, if you want me to take accountability to deliver, then if you're going to pick the partner, then actually you're taking accountability to deliver. So if you want me to take accountability, you need to let me pick. And that was difficult to start with, as you can imagine, but having then done the picking and then delivered success, you then build the trust, and people say, yeah, do you know what, I'm actually not an HR operations outsourced delivery model expert as the whatever global HR officer of the company or so on. So maybe I am actually better off leaving it to people for whom that is their profession. So we've sort of been through that phase. It's not to say, obviously, that there isn't an enormous amount of engagement back and forward on here's the thinking, here's this way, but when it comes to the real accountability of the decision making, it's living with me if it's within my European scope, or if it's some sort of global deal, then obviously I'm an influencer rather than the final. Good. Any last questions, or are you shaking your head face saying get off?
Yeah. Of course I wouldn't do that to you, Richard.
Good. Well, thank you very much for all your attention. I hope it was helpful.